My life's verse. My life's verse is Psalm 34 too. And she said, no, you wrote it in my kid's Bible. That was the kid's mother of the Bible that I just got done signing. And she showed it to me. There was my name, Pastor, right at the top. And right underneath it said G-E-N. If I ever saw a G, and if I ever saw an E, and if I ever saw an N, that was a G-E-N. And 34 ... too. And I thought, well, I guess it's in a hurry. But I said, well, what does it say? And then she read it in mine hearing. And it says, when Hamor, the prince of the country, saw her, he took her and he lay with her and he defiled her. And I said, I said, sister, you got to believe me. I didn't do that on purpose. Honest, I don't know how it got in there. I'm being honest. I don't know if she thought it was some dumb joke or if I just tried to do something to her kid. And I said, I don't know, it was a demon got my hands, an automatic writing. I don't know. You say, how do you do that? Honest folks, I don't know how you do that. I have no idea on earth how you do it. But now, if I sign somebody's Bible, if you find a Bible somebody's got, and it says Jim White, and it says PSL, that is pre-Genesis 34:2. If you find a Bible I signed, and it says Jim White, PS 34 ... that is post-Genesis 34:2. I don't know how that happened. To this day, I don't know how that happened, but somehow my brain was on vacation, like it oftentimes is, and I just wrote in there just plain as day. And listen, after that, I went through the Bible. In the King James Bible, I went through every chapter 34 and second verse in that book. There is not another worse verse than Genesis 34:2 to put in a kid's Bible, pretending that it's a life verse. You couldn't pick a worse one if you wanted to get a worse one, as far as 34.2 is concerned. And I don't know how that happens, but sometimes trouble just comes. That's just the way it is. And do what you will. So what do? You just get up and you go on. You just got to do. Most of our troubles, at least that's in my case, is because of my own carelessness and my own stupidity, my own carnality. That's usually why I have troubles. Not thinking. I'm down there at that meeting with Brother Heaton. It was raining. And I was concerned about stepping in this puddle. And so they got an opening, and the preacher saw it, got an opening over here. They got these boards down about this low on the other side. I knew I was stepping, because I didn't want to step in that mud hole. I was stepping across, and I was stepping across the little water, and I knew I was right there where those boards were, and I was just going to duck and go under. And for some reason, I forgot to duck. I banged my head in, but it left a mark. You can see up there, it's not quite as bad as it was. It was bleeding that night. Why? Because I'm just lollygagging, not thinking, well, bam. And I meant to duck. I knew I was going to duck. That was the plan of attack, was to duck. I didn't duck. I just walked right into the stupid board. And oftentimes, that's what most of our trouble is because of our own carelessness, our own carnality. But trouble will come. Now, most of the time, it's minor irritation stuff. Sometimes it gets a little more serious. But life is troublesome. You notice I would submit to you also as we look at our text. Not only is life troublesome, but life is tough. He says down there in verse number 2, he said, he cometh forth like a flower, and he's cut down. Now, from the flower standpoint, that's tough. He's a little flower. I don't know a whole lot about flowers. Don't care that much for flowers myself. I'm just not a flower type of man. I just never have been. And nothing wrong about that, And I got a preacher friend of mine, man, he grows some of the most beautiful flowers I've ever seen. They've never been in my bag. I was at home one time, I was cutting, I had my underwear out, and sitting on the bed, got some new underwear, and I had my knife out, and I was cutting the label out in the bag. And Judith came in, she said, what are you doing? I said, I'm cutting these flowers out of my underwear. She said, you dummy, that's not flowers, that's fruit. I said, well, that's even worse. I don't want no fruit in my underwear, that's for sure. I thought it was flowers, I never really looked that close at it. But I don't know a whole lot about flowers, but I do know this, that when folks grow flowers, they grow these flowers until they get right to their zenith. They're not going to be any more full, they're not going to be any more beautiful, and when they get to their very best they're going to be, somebody goes out there with a sharp knife or a pair of scissors and cuts them down. They bring them inside the house. Here they were out there minding their own business, down in the dirt, what they always do. Now somebody cuts them off, brings them in, stuffs them in a vase, drowns them in a vase of water, and sticks them up there on the table, and now they don't have natural sunlight anymore. They got to get it filtered through a window pane. Now from the flower standpoint, that's got to be tough. But see, that's the way life is sometimes. I mean, sometimes the best thing you can teach your children is that life ain't always fair.
That's right.
One of the best lessons my father ever taught me was, son, life is not fair. And sometimes you're not always going to get the long end of the stick, my friend. Sometimes you're going to wind up with the short end. And sometimes you ain't going to have no end, because somebody else is going to have it and whack you upside the head with it. That's what they're going to do. That's just what life is. Life is troublesome, and life can be tough. And you just got to get used to it. But some folks, they just think, well, if it was just different. If I'd have been born, on the other side of the tracks. If I'd have been born, with a silver spoon in my mouth. Well, you'd probably choke to death before you're 2 years old if you had that happen. And, for some of us, that's just not the way it is. I mean, I've often thought, listen, if I got a kidney transplant, I'm sure I'd wake up in the recovery room and find out my donor was a bedwetter. Sometimes life it's tough, brother, and don't work out like you're going to think it's going to work out. But that's the way it is. You just got to keep on going on and serving God. But some folks say, man, if I could just be, if I could be on that first class side, So rich folks nowadays always are getting a bad rap. I wish I were one. You can bad rap me all you want to, pal. If I was rich, I wouldn't care what you said. But they get a bad rap. But some folks say, well, if I could just be rich, right up there in first class. I know when I used to travel a lot, used to travel by air. I was in the airport every week going somewhere, and I used to always did up my things in advance, got the cheapest ticket I could, and the closest thing to first class I ever got, was like everybody else, walking through the first class section, going back to the cattle car, with all the peons back there. But I mean, it looked nice, got big, wide leather seats and everything. And I was going over to Europe, and I had, got my ticket. I always, like I say, got it in advance because I'm a creature of habit, and I had my seat. Depending on what kind of aircraft I was on, I had my particular seat that I wanted. And that's the seat I wanted to sit in, partly because I'm a creature of habit, and secondly, I had all the exits memorized. That way, if something happened and things filled up with smoke, I knew where I was going. Because they say when you're flying, if something happens to the altitude, and this little yellow thing going to pop out. And then they tell you put it over your mouth and you continue to breathe normally. Now listen, I'm going to tell you what, you're up there 5 miles in the air. If one of them little yellow things pops out, you're going to be doing a lot of things, but breathing normal ain't one of them. Because I've been there, and when it popped out, I quit breathing. I thought, this is the end of the show. I've already determined, if they say we're going down, I'm going to pop my seatbelt off, jump out in the middle of the aisle, and hope I get thrown clear of the wreckage so they can at least maybe identify my remains. Because you're coming down. I mean, how are you going to breathe normal when you're sitting there with the screams of 300 other passengers in your ears as you're headed down toward Mother Earth at 500 miles an hour? You know what happens when you smack the earth or smack the side of a mountain going 500 miles an hour in a little thin aluminum tube? I'm telling you, friend, you're a smushed up crispy critter. That's what you are. You can write it off. It's all over. And they say, I've been in a couple of airplane incidences, and you're supposed to get and put your head down between your knees. And up there in coaching, I thought, that's impossible. Hey, folks, that ain't impossible. I've done it before. It ain't impossible when you think, it's amazing what you can do when you have to do it. But, I'd go on and I'd always envy these folks a little bit up there in first class. And I got down to the airport that morning to pick up my ticket. And the little lady, she said, well, Reverend White, it's good to see you again. I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, this flight here, I think we're going to Fort Worth, or not Fort Worth, but Frankfurt, Germany. She said, this flight is full. It's just booked, full. I said, well, praise the Lord. Man, I'm glad to see Delta's doing so good. It's good business. That's good. She said, well, because of that, we have had to give your seat to somebody else. I said, whoa, hang on here, lady. I said, turn around and look at that. You see that sign hanging on the back window right there on the back wall? That you see that L and that Delta? I paid for that last year. I said, don't tell me that you gave my seat away. And said, you call that gentleman up and tell him you're giving him another seat. That's my seat. I always fly in that seat. You know I fly in that seat. I don't fly in any other seat. That's my seat. I want that seat. She said, preacher, just hold on just a minute. She said, because you're such a loyal customer, we have, with your permission, we are going to give you an upgrade to first class. I said, well, let me think about that, dear lady. Instead of giving it my full consideration and thought, I hereby therewith thereunto give you my permission to upgrade me to first class. I mean, somebody's got to make sacrifice, and I'll take one for the team and go ahead and move me up. I mean, I was as excited as a little boy on Christmas morning, Pastor. I mean, I'd never flown first class up to that time. And I got down there, and man, I got seat 1, first row.